This set of notes is a series of important vocabulary terms from Chapter 2 of our economics textbook on economic decision making. A lot of these will be terms that you're familiar with, but may not have always thought about them in an economic context. So as we go through these, talk about them a little bit, please make sure that you're getting the definitions into your set of notes. So starting off, one that I'm sure everybody's very familiar with is the concept of goods. When we're looking at economics, we're looking largely at what is produced, right? So goods are physical objects that are produced for sale, right? For consumers to buy. And so, a grocery store is a great example of that. The shelves are literally filled with goods. The flip of that is services. So in an economy, you produce goods, but the economy also produces services, right? You can spend your money to buy a good, or you could spend your money to buy a service, which is work done by someone else for which a consumer is willing to pay. And so a good example of that is right here, an auto mechanic. Now, if you know how to fix your own car, then great. You don't have to pay for that service, right? You just go buy the goods you need and fix it yourself. But most of us don't know how to do complicated car repairs, and so we take it to a shop where we pay someone for their service. The car mechanic does work for us so we don't have to do it, and in return, I'm willing to pay that person. So the economy is really based on goods and services, right? What goods are being produced, what services are provided. As we have talked about already in Chapter 1, humans have to figure out how to use limited resources in order to satisfy their unlimited wants, right? That there's a scarcity of resources. We don't have unlimited resources. So sometimes that leads to shortages. Right? Now, an important distinction to make here is that resources are always scarce. They're always limited. There's not always, however, a shortage. Okay? A shortage is a temporary condition when there is less of a good or service than is desired. So a good example of that would be, prior to a big storm coming, people tend to go and stock up on, paper towels and toilet paper and, canned goods. And so sometimes you see a shortage. It doesn't mean that they're never going to be back on the shelves. It's just temporarily there's not as much as people want. However, those resources are always scarce, right? We only have a certain amount of trees, and so therefore we can't produce unlimited amounts of toilet paper and paper towels. However, an empty shelf is just a temporary shortage. Eventually, we'll be able to replace it. So speaking of resources, when we think about how do we produce goods and services, there's really three factors that go into producing goods and services: land, labor, and capital. So let's start off with land. Obviously, land includes land, but when we're talking about land resources, I want you to think more than just land itself. It's not just the actual land, but think about it in terms of gifts of nature. So like air is a land resource. Soil, water, plants, energy, trees, right? Fish, gifts of nature that we can use to produce goods and services. So you see a lot of examples here, right? You have land with trees on it. Those trees are a land resource. You have somebody fishing in the lake. That is a land resource. Even the sunshine that's being converted into energy, that is a land resource. So these are gifts of nature that we can use to produce goods and services. All right? The second factor of production is labor. Land by itself doesn't actually produce anything, really. You need labor. And so labor is just that, right? The work, the physical and mental effort that goes into producing goods and services. So if you take land, you take labor, and then you take the third factor of production, which is capital, then you can produce goods and services. So capital, oftentimes students think of capital just as money, and money is capital, but it's more than just money. It's the tools, the machines, the buildings, the technology that you need in order to produce goods and services. So yes, you need money, but money by itself isn't going to turn a tree into lumber. You need the land resource, the tree. You need the labor resource, the worker who knows how to cut the wood. And you need the capital. You need the tools to cut the wood and sand it and make it nice and smooth so it's ready to go to Home Depot or Lowe's where somebody can buy it. Land plus labor plus capital equals goods and services. Now there's a kind of an X factor when it comes to producing goods and services too. And that is entrepreneurship, right? You can have land, labor, and capital, but you still need the thinker. You still need the visionary. You need the person who comes up with new ways to produce goods and services, right? So entrepreneurs are, thinkers, they're visionaries, they're risk takers. Steve Jobs here is a great example, right? He came up with these incredibly visionary products for Apple that changed the world, okay? Elon Musk with Tesla and SpaceX, right? He's eccentric, but he's very much a visionary, right? You could talk about Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, right? They have ideas of how they want to produce something new, and then they go and use the land, labor, and capital to try to produce it. The last couple of terms I want to talk about in terms of thinking about when we make economic choices, what do we get and what do we give up? So the first is utility. In economic terms, utility means the satisfaction or benefit that a person receives when they make a choice. Right? Human beings are pretty predictable, right? We like to choose things that bring us happiness, that bring us benefit, right? So the example I'll use here is pizza. I'm going to choose to order a pizza because it brings me satisfaction. I like pizza. It's delicious. So I make that choice because it's going to bring me utility. It's going to bring me satisfaction. One of the principles we talked about in chapter 1 was thinking at the margins. So that connects to this idea of marginal utility. So if utility is satisfaction that we get when we make a choice, then marginal utility is what additional satisfaction would be gained from having one more, buying one more, eating one more. So pizza, continuing with this analogy, marginal utility is how much satisfaction do you get from eating the second piece. Typically, that marginal utility is pretty high, right? Ooh, that was a good piece of pizza. I want another one. Okay? How much additional satisfaction would you get from having one more? A second piece of pizza probably brings you pretty high marginal utility, so you're likely to eat a second piece of pizza. Let's think about buying a PlayStation 5. You bought one, it cost a lot of money, you bought one. That has a really high utility. You're excited, you're really pumped to go play this new game system. How much satisfaction would it bring you to buy another one? Probably not that much, right? Because you already have one, and adding a second one isn't going to bring you much additional satisfaction. In fact, it's going to cost an awful lot of extra money, and you don't really need it. So your marginal utility is low. So you're not likely to do it. Building off of that is the idea of diminishing marginal utility. And this is the idea that the more we get of a good or a service, the less satisfaction we get from each additional one. So go back to pizza. The marginal utility of your second slice is usually pretty high, right? Oh, that was so good. I want another one. The marginal utility of a third slice is usually a little bit lower. Okay, it's still really good, but I'm starting to fill up a little bit. And then your fourth slice, the marginal utility is even lower still. Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have had that last slice of pizza. I'm starting to get a stomach ache. And so our example here, right, is, oh my gosh, I've had 9 slices. Someone please stop me, right? The more you get of something, the less marginal utility, the less satisfaction you get from each additional unit. The last of our vocabulary terms for today, just kind of introducing these terms, is opportunity cost. In the first chapter, we talked about trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. Whenever you make a decision, you are choosing not to do something else. Okay, so there's always lots of trade-offs, but there's only one opportunity cost. When you make a decision, the opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative. So whatever your next best choice is, that's your opportunity cost. Or the book talks about it's what you lose when you choose. So you go, okay, I have a tough decision to make. I've got 1 hour of free time. What can I do with that? Well, there's lots of things you could do. But you narrow it down to your 2 best choices. All right, I'm either going to take this hour and study for my quiz that I have coming up, or I'm going to go watch 2 episodes of my favorite show. Whichever one you choose, the other one is your opportunity cost, right? If I choose to study for an hour, my opportunity cost is losing out on 2 episodes of my favorite show. If I choose 2 episodes of my favorite show, my opportunity cost is I'm giving up an hour of studying, okay? These images are included in your vocabulary document. So hopefully, as I've talked about them, having those images in your document will help you to understand them a little bit better. If you have questions about these, please ask, okay? We're just starting off this chapter, but I do want to make sure that you've got a clear understanding of these terms as we get going into looking at economic decisions.